Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mrs. G's Story Time. We are reading the book Patricia St. Tells Her Own Story by Patricia St. with permission of 10 of Those Publishing Company. And we are on Chapter 15, My Life at the Hospital. I started my new life in Tangier with 7 teenagers. We lived to begin with in a basement, but later moved upstairs as numbers increased to the beautiful villa which had been the doctor's house until Farnham built his own bungalow in 1956. This was a student nurse's home called Dar Scott, example the House of Scott, named after Lady Scott, the kind local patroness who gave substantially to the setting up of the first school of nursing for Moroccan girls. The girls were mostly sent to us by missionaries from all over the country and from Algeria, and there were those who had become interested in Christianity, if not already committed Christians, and wanted to learn more. So we taught them anatomy and physiology, basic nursing skills, and the Bible. This training was something of an innovation in Morocco, as nearly all the nursing government hospitals were done by men. For a girl, it meant appearing unveiled in front of men in a men's ward, and a European sister had to be present all the time in those early days, or the girl's parents would never have allowed their daughter such laxity of conduct. The girls soon proved their worth. In spite of their very limited education and the early age at which they came to us, which was usually 15 to 16 years old, they all turned out to be innately clean, quick to learn, kind, professional in their behavior. As far as their nursing was concerned, it was almost all cases a success. A few went out to England or Switzerland to gain certificates. Some obtained responsible posts in the Moroccan hospitals. The majority left after 2 or 3 years to marry, and no doubt their training helped them in the care and the bringing up of the children. Spiritually, the picture was not so bright. While they were with us, they seemed to respond to the Christian teaching, but I was still only beginning to understand the stranglehold of Islam and the spiritual warfare involved in the release of its followers. Of those who stood firm and became recognized as active disciples of Jesus, I cannot write, as they are alive and vulnerable. But there are those few from among the student nurses and those who work for us in the hospital who remain true, and for them we thank God. Of those, some have left the country and can live openly as Christians, and others serve in a quiet, limited way, which at present all that is possible to a Christian woman living in a 100% Muslim country. Only a very few have let their light shine more clearly and have suffered. One saw Jesus. It was worth it all for those few seconds, she said afterwards. He was there beside me. He was so beautiful. He didn't stay, but I knew he would come back. Not all, by any means, continued as Christians, but a few did. And those who stayed in Tangier joined the little Arab church which continued to meet there for many years. Fatima and her family, who followed me from the mountains after a time, became a part of this group. But she was a country woman through and through and never quite adapted to the town life. My life at this time was made up of varied activities. Much of it, as far as I was concerned, was routine, living with the girls, teaching them, overseeing their leisure hours. Farnham and Janet's 6 children also played a big part in my life, as it often fell to me to look after them if there was an emergency operation or Janet needed a well-earned afternoon off. The dear grannies, my mother and Janet's, who both came to live with us, also needed care and attention. Janet and I shared this between us with the very loving, capable help of several faithful Moroccan ladies. The milk clinic for mothers and babies was close to my heart. It was for undernourished and starving babies. They were weighed weekly and given milk powder provided by U.S. Relief Program and vitamins by the hospital. It was naturally very popular, as if breast milk failed. Other milk was far too expensive to consider for the type of woman who came to the hospital, and babies were expected to survive on bread and mint tea, with disastrous results. It was satisfying work. The babies would arrive with huge heads, sunken eyes, bloated stomachs, and stick-like arms and legs, and whimpering in their mother's arms. The transformation was rapid once the feeding started, and over a few weeks or months their eyes grew bright, and their little heads lifted and they began to sit up. The sad faces grew childlike and chubby, and their weight steadily increased. By the end of the year, when they started to cut their teeth, we would try to say goodbye to them. We would explain to them that now they could join the family around the bean pot and leave room for another baby at the clinic. But it was the hardest thing in the world to get rid of them. There were the endless reasons to bring them back, endless tricks to prolong the connection. In many cases, we never really did get rid of them. Within 2 or 3 years, they would come trotting back to Sunday school. Auntie Edith, an older Danish missionary, started a school for them, as many families could not spare their girls to go to school or pay for the shoes and books required for attendance at grammar schools. In the summer holidays, we organized day camps, teaching them from the Bible before taking them for picnic and games on the beach. Many of them became very really our children and grew up to join the student nurses in some instances. One day, an illiterate woman from a distant village arrived with a very sick baby in her arms. She was urged to leave the baby in the ward, but felt unable to stay. There were other little children at home and goats to be cared for, and the terrible fear of her baby dying without her was strong. She took the medicine and turned to go, but it was very hot and the way was long. Janet suggested that she and the baby should spend the day together in her home. She would give the child 3 hourly penicillin injections and feed it by a small tube, and when the heat cooled off a little, they could start back to the village. S agreed, and we sat quietly in the living room where a cool breeze swept in from the sea. Between treatments, Janet showed her the wordless book with its black and white and red and gold pages. We have showed it to hundreds of illiterate women, and they have smiled and nodded and forgotten. Just occasionally, one knows it to be true, and such a one was S. Her baby's condition improved during the day, and she went home knowing that something life-changing had happened. She kept coming back to hear more at possible and impossible hours, hungry for any crumb of teaching anyone could give her. One Sunday morning she happened to arrive at the time of the little Arabic communion service, and sitting there with that small, timid group, something happened again. "I have understood," she said afterwards. "Jesus said, 'Come to me.' Jesus said, 'Follow me.' Jesus said, 'Take up your cross.' And that is what I'm going to do." Her next baby was almost due, and we did not see her for some time. Several weeks later, when I was sitting writing at a table, she suddenly stormed into the room, apparently very angry. She carried the ex-baby on her back and the new baby in her arms, and she brought her fist down on the table with a crash. "You never told me," she exclaimed, and burst into tears. I got her to sit down. "What did we never tell you?" I asked. And then it all came pouring out. She had gone back to her village and witnessed joyfully of her newfound faith. "I thought they would all want to know," she said, "but the neighbors were suspicious and hostile. And when her baby was born, no one, not even her own mother, would help her. It was a long, difficult labor, and only her 7-year-old daughter stood by her, and only 4 or 5 of the neighbors came to the seventh-day feast, so beloved of all the village ladies. She had not known it would be like this, and she hated the lot of them." I asked her if she felt she had made a mistake. Was the way too hard? Did she want to turn back? She gazed at me in astonishment, and once again the fist came down on the table. "Never, never, never," she cried. It was true. We had never told her. Time had been so limited, and we at the hospital had been so busy. We went through the Gospels, picking out the passages where Jesus warned his disciples that they would have to suffer. She seemed to calm down, and so we started again, tracing through the Lord's teaching on forgiveness, and she listened quietly, until we came to that supreme, shining example of forgiveness, the words of Jesus on the cross. "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Down came the fist on the table again. "I don't believe it," she said. I asked her why not, and she replied, "It's impossible. No human being could ever ask forgiveness of those who were hammering nails into his hands." And I suddenly realized what I had not formulated before, that she was right. No human love could respond like that. But this was not human love. This was the love of God, the very love that he offers to share with us, the love of God shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. I was talking beyond my experience, but she seemed to understand at once. This was the answer to her need. "You mean," she questioned, "I've got to go home, and the first woman who has a baby, I've got to be the first to go and help her?" She looked at me wonderingly. Of course, I was never going to speak to them again, but then you see, you never told me. I cannot write freely for her family's sake. I can only say that S went home to love as Jesus loved, and to overcome evil with good. In an amazing way, she has proved that it works, and the love of Christ indwelling and reaching out through a simple human life will draw people to himself. There are some today who would say, howbeit secretly, that through a glimpse of that gentle compassion shown to them in the life of a simple village woman, they have come to believe. Another woman came from a distant village and was admitted to the hospital for minor surgery. She stayed only a few days, but again was shown the wordless book and asked to take one home. She was very shy and rather inarticulate, and we did not know how much she had understood, nor did we especially remember her. There were so many. It was probably about 2 years later that she suddenly appeared with 5 or 6 ragged, bright-eyed, excited little village children and attached. She strode in, waving her wordless book. "Don't you know me?" she cried, seeing our surprised faces. "I'm your sister in Christ. My sins are forgiven. Now I have brought my children. There is no school in our village, and I have brought one of them to learn to read to me from your book. You can have which one you like, this one, or this one, or this one. Keep him and send him to school until he can come home and read the Bible to me." It seemed a reasonable request, and I chose a 9-year-old who was thrilled to stay. He fitted in well and enjoyed the local school, but he had never slept in a bed before, and it seemed a bit cold and lonely. After 2 weeks, I took him back to his village for the weekend. No hero returning from space could have had a more excited, enthusiastic welcome, and I promised to return on Sunday afternoon to take him back. When I arrived, there was a feast prepared, and we ate bread and read together, and he was ready to come. The car stood just outside, and I had not locked the door. When I opened it, I found that Muhammad, age 7, had just got there first. He had entwined himself with the brakes and could not be pulled out, and from somewhere between the front seats a voice said, "I'm coming too." It seemed the perfect solution. 2 in a bed would be warm and cozy, and 2 going to school could be compatible. They stayed with us for 2 years until school started in the next village, and they were able to continue their education from home. I can only say that their reading achieved its object. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Tomorrow we'll be doing chapter 16, Nieces and Nephews, or Nephews and Nieces. I love you. I'm praying for you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.